I consider myself to be an amateur sports bettor and trader who so far hasn't been confident enough to back using larger stakes. But the Football World Cup is a competition where you can bet on many high profile games in a short space of time, giving me the perfect opportunity to apply the skills that I have learned over the past couple of years to see how I get on using the larger stakes. I would use Betfair's exchange where I can place back bets and lay bets throughout the duration of the tournament, and I only really had 3 goals throughout this tournament. They were: number 1, to use and get comfortable using larger stakes; number 2, betting as many games as possible so I could get comfortable with the larger wins and the larger losses; and number 3, to try and not lose all of my money. During this mega video, I'm going to show you literally every single bet that I place during the 2022 World Cup. You're going to get to see all of the highs, all of the lows, and all of the in-betweens. I'll keep a P&L tracker in the bottom right hand corner of the video so you can keep track of where I'm up to. I should note that all of those values in the P&L are taken after Betfair has already taken their commission. I really think that there's value in this video for everybody. If you are much better at sports betting than I am, you'll be able to get a lot of entertainment from this video watching me make objectively bad decisions, which at the moment I'm just not good enough to be able to see. If you're about as good as I am at betting, this will be a great way to watch someone of a similar quality and see and compare the differences between our different styles, and it'll help you improve in your trading and betting. And if you're worse at betting than I am, or if you're at the very start of your betting career, then this may be one of the most important videos that you'll ever see, as you'll get invaluable insight. This is something that I wish was around when I was first getting into taking betting seriously. Right, with all the waffle out of the way, let's start looking at the bets that I placed during the 2022 World Cup. Just before we get started, I should say that for the first few trades I wasn't taking the screenshots of my Betfair results, but after the second or third day when I realised that I wanted to make this video, I started to screenshot every single one of my results. So the first few I'm just going to be showing you my end result through the Betfair website, but after that I'll start showing the screenshots of the game in play. Should also say, when I'm showing my Betfair results, you'll see a lot of these -10p losses and the occasional £9.80 win. This is all down to my laying at 101 strategy that I've made a video about. I'll leave a link in the description below if you want to check that video out and learn more about that strategy. About a third of the way through the tournament, I stopped implementing the laying at 101 strategy. I did this just to make the results look easier on the screen so you could just see the trades I was doing on the World Cup rather than all these other games that the bot was triggering on. Without any further ado, let's get into the actual tournament itself and all the bets that I placed. The first game of the tournament was Qatar versus Ecuador. Not the greatest of games, I must admit, but the market was getting quite a lot of attention just because it was the first game of the tournament. And like most people in the markets, I hadn't watched either of these two teams play, so I didn't really have an opinion about the prices of either team. However, once the game went in play, it became abundantly clear that Ecuador were a level above. Other people in the market had noticed this too, and Ecuador's price was coming in more and more as the game progressed, as it became more and more obvious that Ecuador were very likely to win this game. So I didn't get the best price if I did back in at the start of the game, but I still thought it was a valuable position back in here at 1.96. Ecuador went into the lead, they scored a second, and that was a winning bet there, straight off the bat. I'm not quite sure why there was such a mispricing in this market with Qatar having such short odds relative to how good they actually were. Potentially it was because of the home advantage they had, but I don't think any amount of home advantage could make this set of players play well enough to win this game. In the second half of this game, I also picked up another profit, backing under 2.5 goals when the game was 2-0. I could see that Ecuador was settled and happy with the game being 2-0. They weren't pressing on to get that third goal. I also looked at the quality of Qatar's players and thought, doesn't seem very likely that they were going to get back into this game. So this was a fairly simple position that I took, just a straight up back bet, and it turned out to be profitable. On to day 2 now, and it started with Netherlands versus Senegal. I didn't really trade this game, I was working at the time. I briefly entered the market with a back bet on 0-0, but I decided against that more or less straight away, cashing out for a break-even position. So yeah, didn't really trade this game, so let's move on to the next game. And the next game was another game which I didn't put a position on, and that was England's first game against Iran. I felt like England's price was a little bit too short in this game. I couldn't really tell if England were going to scrape this win, like 1 or 2-0 in the second half, or whether England were just going to thrash Iran. In the end, England did end up thrashing Iran. I wasn't too sure about this game, so I didn't place any bets on it, which moves on to the third game of the day, and that was Wales versus USA. and this is a game which I did bet on. In this game, it looked like the odds for under 2.5 goals are coming too short too quickly, in my opinion. At around the 28th minute into this game, the odds for under 2.5 goals were priced at 1.25. And for those of you who don't know the underlying probabilities of goals scored in games, 1.25 after 28 minutes is very, very short in this market. I was watching the game and thought, I don't think this game is lacking goals as much as the market suggests that it is. So I went in with a lay bet against under 2.5 goals, meaning I wanted goals to be scored in the game. And not long later, USA opened up the scoring, and that enabled me to cash out of the market after the odds went out after the goal was scored. I wasn't done there with that game either. In the second half, it became apparent that the USA was sitting back more and more, and Wales were getting more and more into the game, looking more threatening. I believe that the price of the draw for the game didn't fairly represent the actual probability of Wales getting back into the game and getting the draw. So I placed a small back bet on the draw, and lo and behold, Wales went on to equalise through a penalty, and the game was 1-1. At this point, I had a couple of decisions to make, and that was whether I wanted to cash out of the position right there and then, or whether I wanted to leave the position as it was, take my liability off. In the end, I decided to, in a way, double down on my position by placing another lay bet in on the USA. I did this despite knowing that the USA were at high odds now, but I thought that if anyone was going to get a winner in this game, it was going to be Wales. The USA looked completely shot, they was completely out of the game at this point, they were just wanting the game to end and taking the 1-1 and moving on to the next game. In the end, the game finished 1-1, and I was profitable on both positions, both the back bet on the draw and then the lay bet on the United States. Day 3 saw me do quite a few bets on the first game of the day between Argentina and Saudi Arabia. I'm showing you my results from this game on screen now. The bets I want to spend time focusing on here is the correct score at half-time market and then the match odds market. Firstly, the correct score at half-time. Argentina had a few goals disallowed in the first half. When it was 1-0, they scored a disallowed goal, and I thought that disallowed goal sort of took the momentum and the energy out of Argentina's attack. The game was approaching half-time, and I thought it was a good opportunity to back correct score half-time 1-0. I did this by backing at odds of 2.0 because I thought it was the greater than 50% probability of the game remaining 1-0 at half-time, and it happened to stay that way, so I had a winning bet here. Next up was the match odds market. As you can see, I made a profit in this market as well, and I did this by laying Argentina at odds of 1.04 when they were 1-0 up. I did this because 1.04 is so short for a team that is only 1-0 up in a game, and Saudi Arabia weren't that bad. Their pressing structure was causing Argentina a little bit of problems, and I thought that there was more of a chance of Saudi Arabia getting back into this game as those very short odds for Argentina to win suggested that they actually had. Argentina did end up conceding, and then ended up conceding another to make Saudi Arabia lead 2-1. I somewhat bottled the position a little bit here by cashing out. I thought Argentina might wake up after this and get back into the game and turn it around. In the end it didn't, the game finished 2-1, but I cashed out and still made a profit. Not as high as it could have been if I left it, but I don't really have too many regrets about that situation. Denmark and Tunisia was the next game. I started this game using the under 2.5 goal strategy. I've got a video on my channel. If you're interested in this strategy and want to learn more about it, I'll leave a link to that in the description below. So I thought there was going to be a slow start in this game. It turned out there was, and I was able to net around £10 of profit from this slow start in the game. The next bet I opened was actually a back bet on Denmark to win the game. I actually quite like the look of Denmark going into this tournament. I quite like a lot of the players that they had, and I thought this was a good opportunity for them to win the game. At the start of the game, I thought the price was a little bit too short, and as I said in the previous trade, the under 2.5 goal trade, I did think it was going to be a bit of a slow, cagey start to this game. So I thought if I waited until a little bit later in the half, I could get a back bet on Denmark at much better odds than they currently were. So I got the back bet on Denmark after the drift at about odds of 2.0. I was very happy with this entry point, went exactly how I wanted it to go in terms of there was a slow start and the odds did drift and I could get a better value. But unfortunately for me this time, the bet didn't pay off and the game finished 0-0. So it was pretty disappointing. It was a £100 loss. So this was the first big loss of the tournament. It was £100 down the drain, and there's plenty more losses to come. Don't worry about that. But to be honest now, even looking back at this game in hindsight in this bet, I'm not too worried about it or too bothered about it. I'm quite happy with the execution. It didn't work out, but even from a psychological perspective, it didn't seem to affect me that much, losing £100. I was quite happy with the position that I took. I got back into the profit in the next game with Mexico versus Argentina. The main position I took in this game was a lay bet on Poland. I did this at quite high odds, and I did it specifically just after they missed the penalty. I did this because I thought that missing the penalty was a big moment in this game, and I thought it would be a massive switch in the momentum. Mexico would gain enormously and push on now and put Poland under water attack and quite possibly go on to win the game. So it's quite a big risk laying such high odds on Poland, but I was quite confident now that Poland would be mentally drained after that missing that big moment of the match. In the end, the missed penalty didn't seem to be much of a catalyst for Mexico to get back into the game. It almost seemed like both teams were happy and content with a 0-0 draw, especially given to what happened to Argentina earlier in the day, because Argentina were in their group. So a draw here became not actually that bad of a result for both teams. So I decided to then also place a back bet on the correct score market and a correct score 0-0. The game would remain how it was. Looking back at this now, this was a bit of a risk because I obviously have the lay bet on Poland and then obviously a back on 0-0. So if Poland were to get the goal, which is always possible, then I'd be facing quite a big loss there. So in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have also gone in the market with the back bet of 0-0. I should have done one or the other. But in the end, I did what I did and both bets managed to come in and I made a nice profit. And the final game of day 3 was France's turn. This was France's first game of the tournament and that was against Australia. I quite like the look of France heading into this tournament. A lot of people seem to be writing them off for 2 reasons that I could see. Firstly, the World Cup curse, as it so happens that the teams that win the previous World Cup often really struggle in the following World Cup. And also people were saying that France had some key injuries to some key players. However, I actually thought that the injuries were a blessing in disguise. Yes, of course they were going to miss Benzema, but the injuries in midfield to Pogba and Kante I actually thought could have been a blessing in disguise for them. I actually think missing those 2 players actually increase the chances of France winning this tournament rather than decreasing it. So I really like France going to this tournament, but this first game against Australia was a little bit of a tough test. I think Australia was going to sit back in a low block and try to keep France out and aim to try and get a 0-0 draw. So I thought it'd take quite a while into the match before France would be able to break Australia down and take the lead. So given that I thought that there weren't going to be goals early on, I felt it was a good opportunity to place a back bet in the under 2.5 goal market. This is typical what I do when I think there's going to be a slow start to a game. The position didn't go too well. There was actually an early goal in the game and it was for Australia. So I got this position wrong. I was wrong about there being no goals early on. So I was happy to cash out, taking the £25 loss. But the Australia goal gave me an opportunity now because France's price had obviously drifted as they were 1-0 down. So I could now back France if I wanted to at much better odds as I could do before the Australia goal. And I decided that, yes, this was a position that I wanted to take. Did think France were very good going into this tournament. So I backed France at odds of 1.85 when they were 1-0 down, and not long later, the goal always looked like it was coming, to be honest, but not long later, after placing the bet, France got the equaliser, and then another, and then another, and then another, and ended up winning the game 4-1. So that enabled me to lock £80 worth of profit. I also did a little bit of scalping late on in this game in the unders markets. I didn't think another goal was going to be coming, but the odds were still quite high and I was getting some quite good time decay, so I could net quick profits here and there as the price was coming in. On to day 4 now, and the first game was Croatia versus Morocco. And Morocco are a decent side, don't get me wrong, but I still think Croatia, despite getting quite hold now, particularly in the midfield, they're still one of the elite international teams at this level. The odds on Croatia were actually quite good. I was getting over evens, about 2.3. I wasn't too confident, but I was confident enough to think that this was a value position on Croatia to win, so I placed a £25 back bet. If I was more confident, I would have staked up higher to 50 or maybe £100, but I said I wasn't that confident. So it was a £25 stake and the game finished 0-0 and I was happy to take the £25 loss. The next game of the day saw Germany face Japan and the under 2.5 odds caught my eye straight away here. They were starting over odds of 2.5 and don't get me wrong, Germany are an elite team that can score lots of goals, but I thought in this game, Japan were going to sit back, try to absorb the pressure, aim to take the draw if they could. And Germany are still an elite team, but this is probably one of the weakest Germany sides that I've seen in my lifetime. They don't really have a lot of top goal scorers in this team either. So I thought the chances of Germany like blowing Japan away were quite slim. So the under 2.5 goal trade seemed like a good position to take here. I entered in with a £50 stake. Unfortunately, Germany took the lead through a penalty, but at the time I'd already taken about £20 of my £50 liability off already, so I could cash out for more or less a break-even trade at this point. And when the game was 1-0 now to Germany, I thought that odds of 1.15 for Germany were a bit too short really. I mean, Japan are a decent side, and now that they were losing and would have to come out a little bit more, I thought that there was a good chance, much more than the odds suggested, of Japan getting into this game. So it was good enough for me to place a £100 lay bet on Germany, so that was risking £15 for a potential £100 worth of profit. And luckily for me, Japan ended up equalising, so this was a great news for me. At this point I had three options. I could cash out for a nice healthy profit, I could have taken my liability off and just had a free bet situation, or I could have just left the trade and hoped that Germany wouldn't score in the time remaining in the game. I decided to leave the trade open because Germany weren't looking overly threatening, and even luckier for me, Japan ended up scoring another goal, making it 2-1 and enabling me to walk away with a full £100 of profit. Next up, it was Spain's turn against Costa Rica, and Spain are tactically one of the strongest teams in the tournament. I did believe that, but I thought they lacked a cutting edge, in particular an elite striker in their team who could get them lots of goals. So I didn't think there was that many goals in this Spain side. I did think that they were going to win this game, but maybe later on, sometime in the second half, they would get the breakthrough after wearing Costa Rica down with lots and lots of possession. Odds of 2.82 in the under 2.5 goal market were far too tempting for me to turn down, given what I just said about my perceived perception that Spain would struggle for goals in this tournament. So I placed a back bet on under 2.5 goals, but unfortunately Spain did score a relatively early goal, so I had to cash out for a loss on this position. And then at 1-0, I thought that the market somewhat overreacted in the any other home win correct score market. So at 1-0, the odds for Spain to win by scoring 4 or more goals was now down at odds of 2.0. I thought this was a bit too short, and I thought that Spain's style of play wouldn't be to push on and get these extra goals needed for me to lose my bet. I thought they would just have a disciplined performance, controlling the possession. Yes, they might score maybe 1 or 2 more goals throughout the rest of the 90 minutes, but I thought that they wouldn't really push on and score as many goals as they ended up doing, which in fact was 7 goals. So my lay bet here ended up losing. Looking back now though, I still think it was an okay bet. I still don't think that Spain played this game over and over again would score the 4 or more goals required for me to lose this bet. But in this time, it did happen, and I had to take the loss and move on to the next market. Later on in the game, I did a little bit of scalping in the unders markets. I do like to do this on these high-scoring games, like I did earlier in the France versus Australia game, just because the market thinks there's going to be goals, 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 and then they tend to dry out, and you can sort of see that happening. So there's some scalping opportunities there. But there was nothing too fancy here, and I didn't make too much money. In the evening game, we saw Belgium against Canada. I actually thought this was going to be an easy win for Belgium. Bizarrely, for some strange reason, I had seen a few of Canada's games leading up to this tournament, and I really didn't think they were very good at all. So I thought, despite this Belgian team having some serious flaws, particularly in the defensive areas, I thought they would get off to a nice, comfortable win in this game. So I decided to place a £100 back bet at odds of 1.61. But to my genuine surprise, the game turned out to be completely different. Canada were absolutely dominating Belgium in the first half. I couldn't understand what was going on. This was nothing like the Canada which I'd seen in previous games. Belgium's price was deservedly drifting out massively. Partway through the first half, it seemed like Belgium had weathered the storm. Canada had missed a penalty, which was unfortunate for me, given my position. But Belgium seemed to be gaining a little bit more control of the game. The odds had drifted out massively, all the way to like 2.5. I sort of doubled down on my position by adding another back bet, a small back bet on Belgium to win, to think that they weathered that storm and that the price was now going to come back in and that Belgium would go on to win the game. But not long after that brief control that Belgium had, Canada began to dominate again, and the position was turning into an absolute nightmare. But extremely fortunately for me, Belgium scored right on the stroke of half time. Given how much of a mess the position had been so far, I was very tempted to cash out right there and then with the Belgium going 1-0 up. But because it was half time, I thought that the manager, Roberto Martinez, could do some tactical switches and try to regain control for Belgium in the game. So I was going to wait, watch the first 5 to 10 minutes of the second half, and if the game stays in the same pattern, I cash out, taking whatever profit was on offer. But in that first 5 to 10 minutes, Belgium seemed to get much more control of the game than what they had in the first half. I would probably leave the bet open. And that is what happened. There was a tactical switch in midfield, and Belgium looked much better. They still don't look great, but Canada didn't look anywhere near as threatening as they did in the first half. I let the bet run all the way to full time, and I was able to profit. This was a bit of a mess of a position. This was the first bet of the tournament so far which I hadn't felt particularly happy about, despite winning, so that was an interesting feeling to have. You'd think that after this bet I would have learnt my lesson and not wanted to back Belgium anymore. But as you'll see a little later in the video, I hadn't learned my lesson and ended up making a mess of another trade. But you'll see that later in the video. So things had gotten off to a good start in the first 4 days or so in this tournament, but things were about to take a turn for the worse over the next couple of days. So firstly, with Switzerland versus Cameroon. I started with an under 2.5 goal trade, expecting a tight start in this game, expecting that the time decay would come in and be able to net a nice early profit early on in the game. I did this, but as you can see on the graph here, the time decay and the price moving in began to slow down and stall. So I just got out of the position, cashed out of the position, and ran away with the profit that I had on offer. Next up, I placed a back bet on over 0.5 first half goals. I have a video on my channel all about this strategy, which I recently uploaded, which you can check out in the description below. Generally speaking, for this tournament, the first half goal strategy wasn't that effective given how many tight games there were, particularly in the first half. But I did think that the probability of a goal being scored was much higher than what the odds were suggesting for this game. Sadly, it turned out not to be the case and it went into half-time at 0-0. At half-time, I queued up a back bet for Switzerland to win. I believe it was at odds of 2.5. I did think that they would come on strong in the second half and really want to win this game given the other teams that were in their group. So I had that bet position there, but unfortunately Switzerland scored before that position could be taken. So I missed out on some profit there, but it's not the end of the world. It was a bit annoying, but I can easily move on. There's plenty more games to trade. And then towards the end of the game, I also backed for another goal to be scored, similar to what I did in the first half, but obviously now for the remaining time of the second half. I thought that Cameroon were going to push on to try and get an equaliser in the game. And then I thought that that would also give Switzerland an opportunity to score on the counter-attack the more and more Cameroon committed to try and get back in the game. But again, this was a position which didn't pay off. The game finished 1-0 to Switzerland, and it was another losing position. Next up was a game I was very confident on, and that was the game between Uruguay and South Korea. I thought the defenders for both of these teams weren't particularly great, and I thought that both teams had players in the forward positions who could be very dangerous and score lots of goals. So I was expecting an entertaining, high-scoring game here. So I had a look at the both teams to score market and saw that both teams to score was priced at odds of 2.2. I actually thought that the market was completely wrong here and these odds should be flipped. But as it often turns out, I was wrong here and the market was right. The game finished 0-0 and it was a £50 loss. Things did continue to get worse on this day. Next up, it was Portugal versus Ghana. I started with a lay bet on Portugal. Portugal's odds seemed far too short for me in this game. Ghana had a decent team which had quite a number of goals in it, and I thought there was a good chance of them opening up the scoring, enabling me to cash out for a profit. Unfortunately, Portugal took the lead in this game through a penalty, but Ghana ended up equalising. And at this point, I could have cashed out for a nice profit given the stake that I'd used, but because I'm dumb, I decided to not do anything and leave the bet open. Portugal went on to score 2 more goals, getting the game to 3-1, and the position was just dead in the water. So that was another losing position. At 3-1, the game looked completely dead. Both teams had sort of accepted their fates, that Portugal was just going to win this game 3-1. The game was being played at a walking pace. So to capitalise on this walking pace game that was being played out now in the final few minutes, I decided to place a back bet, a £50 back bet on under 4.5 goals. So that means no more goals to be scored in the game. As I mentioned, both teams seemed to just be accepting of the result. But out of nowhere, Ghana ended up scoring another goal to make it 3-2. So that was annoying. That was another £50 wiped out of my bank account just like that. Very, very annoying. It did slightly increase the chance of my lay bet on Portugal becoming a winning bet now. And right at the last kick of the game, Ghana very nearly equalised to make it 3-3, but they didn't. So it was 2 losing positions on this game. It was very, very annoying. But there was still time for me to get a winner with the last game of the day. So with £75 lost on the Portugal game and £50 lost on the Uruguay game, it was down to this Brazil-Serbia to try and not make another loss. I was looking at this game and thought it would be a really tough test for Brazil. Serbia are a decent side, both teams are decent, both teams have lots of quality, and I thought that it would somewhat cancel each other out early on and it would be a tight, close, competitive game with not many goals in it. When I think there's going to be a tight game, my go-to strategy is the under 2.5 goal strategy. I got into the market at very good odds, I believe, given what I thought the probability of goals were to be scored. I got in at odds of 2.18 for a £100 stake. As I do in my under 2.5 goal trading strategy, I gradually exited my position by gradually cashing out. And by half time, I completely cashed out of the position for £55 worth of profit, regardless of what happened in the second half. And in the second half, it did look like Brazil was starting to turn up the pressure. Brazil were creating more and more chances, and it looked like a matter of time before Brazil were going to get the goal. So I placed a £100 back bet on Brazil to win for a potential £80 of profit. Brazil did score and got an opening goal in the game. After that, Serbia seemed to be pushing out a little bit more and looking a little bit more dangerous, so I decided to just cash out of the position. Not long after cashing out, taking the profit on offer, Brazil ended up scoring another goal to make it 2-0. So that's slightly annoying. I didn't get the maximum profit as I could have, but at the time, the moment I cashed out, Serbia did look a little bit threatening in my opinion. So that was fine. I recovered this day slightly, and it was now on to the next day. And if you thought day 5 didn't go very well, wait until you see day 6. Day 6 was an absolute shocker. The day started with Wales versus Iran. And I looked at this game and thought that Wales were incredibly good value to win this game. I was very impressed with them in their second half performance against the USA. And I thought that Iran would be a challenging side for Wales to beat, but Wales' key players that turn up time and time again in big games would get them over the line here. So I thought it was very good odds. So I placed a £70 back bet on Wales to win at odds of 2.18. And then in play, I then doubled down on this position, adding a little bit extra value on my back bet of Wales to increase my potential profit. But the later and the later the game went on, it became apparent that Wales were really not very good. Iran were playing really well. I decided to cash out of this position, taking quite a big loss, but I could see that Wales didn't really stand a chance of scoring this game. So I'm glad that I did cash out because Iran went on to score 2 goals in this game and deservedly won the game. But yeah, it was another losing position for me to take. Qatar versus Senegal I thought was going to be a really poor game. There was a pattern of games finishing 0-0 at half time beginning to develop in this World Cup, and I thought this was a golden opportunity for this game to finish 0-0. I thought it was almost destined to happen with these two teams. So I placed a back bet on under 0.5 first half goals. The position was going really well, but unfortunately Senegal scored a goal late on in the first half. It's very annoying when you get so close to the finish line. I could have been taking some of the liability off, but I was treating this as just a straight up back bet. And I was reasonably confident there wasn't very many chances being created for either team up until the goal. So it was quite annoying to take that loss, but we move on. And we move on to not very far, just to half time, where I placed my next bet. And my next bet was a £100 back bet on under 2.5 goals, odds of 1.7, so for a potential £70 worth of profit. The reason I did this was I thought that the second half would play out in a similar pattern as the first half. Now that Senegal had the lead, I thought they would play a little bit deeper in their half. There was not the need to push on and get a goal because they were already winning the game. And I thought that Qatar didn't really have anything going forward that could concern the Senegal defence. So I thought that this game was going to have no more goals in, or maybe Senegal would nick another one at some point in the second half. But sadly, straight away more or less in the second half, Senegal scored a brilliant set piece goal from a corner, and it was now 2-0. So my position looked in a real dire state at this moment in time. But I thought that at 2-0, the similar thing stood, that Senegal was going to be happy to sit back, no need to press on for that next goal, and Qatar aren't really special going forward. So I'm still quietly confident that this position might pay off and that the game would finish with under 2.5 goals. But as my luck seemed to be going at the moment, Senegal ended up conceding, Qatar scored a goal, and fair play to them. It was a great moment for the home nation to get that goal. But not for me, it meant that I lost another £100. And the losing streak wasn't over there either. Next up, it was the Netherlands' turn, and Netherlands were playing Ecuador. Given how Ecuador played in that second half against Qatar, which I mentioned right at the start of the video, Ecuador, you remember, they took a 2-0 lead and then started just defending a little bit, sat deep. I thought that was a bit of a dress rehearsal for how they were going to approach this game against the Netherlands, by sitting back in a low block and being very difficult to break down. I wasn't overly impressed with the attacking players that Netherlands had on the pitch, so I thought that, yes, they're going to struggle to score goals here. So I entered in with a £100 back bet in the under 2.5 goal market. But again, unfortunately, Netherlands scored an early goal. I still didn't think there would be over 2.5 goals in this game, and I didn't think my position would lose as an outright bet. But as this is a trading strategy, I've always found that the best thing to do for me personally is, if there is a goal, to just cash out of the position. So that's what I did here, taking the £24 loss in the under 2.5 goal market. I also targeted the match odds market for this game. I thought that Ecuador, now 1-0 down, were causing Netherlands some problems at the back and were creating a number of chances. And I thought that Ecuador were going to get back into this game, especially considering how well the Netherlands' prices were. After taking the lead, I decided to place a lay bet on the Netherlands, and thankfully I finally got something good happen for me. Ecuador did equalise. And once Ecuador equalised, I had a decision to make, whether to cash out, take the liability off. I decided to do something a little bit fancy. I thought at 1-1, the Netherlands may now kick on again and get a winning goal. So I did a bit of a partial cash out where I'd win no matter what, but I'd win significantly more if the Netherlands got the win. In hindsight, I regret doing this because thinking about both teams, given the wins in the first games, would have been happy with the draw here. So it was a bit of a poor decision. I should have just cashed out altogether once Ecuador got that equaliser. But in the spur of the moment, I made the wrong decision here. But I still walked away with a win in the end, albeit a small one than what I really should have got. The final game of the day was England, and it was their game against the USA. I didn't really place bets on this because I was out watching the game. I did place a bit of a speculative back bet on the USA because it became apparent that the game was drifting towards a 0-0, but if anyone was going to score, it was probably going to be the USA, so I just did a small stake there. But in the second half, I thought Gareth made some actually decent substitutions in regaining control of the game by bringing Henderson on, and then after that point, the USA didn't look like scoring at all. But it was only a small stake, and the risk was not that much. So it was in a losing position, but small bet, it's okay. Let's move on to the next game. Day 7 was a big day for me because I was curious to see how I would react from the psychological blow of losing a lot of money on the previous day. And the first game to trade wasn't the most exciting game of the tournament, and that was Tunisia versus Australia. Given how I expected both teams to set up in this match, and both setups wouldn't be too positive in all likelihood, and given that a loss for either team could possibly spell the end of the tournament for both teams if either team lost, I thought that it was going to be a cagey affair with not many goals. So I was somewhat surprised to see the under 2.5 goals market odds so high relative to some other games that we've seen in the tournament. The odds were 1.7. I thought this was a great value position, so I entered in with a reasonably big stake on under 2.5 goals. Australia did end up scoring in the first half, in the 20 to 30 minute mark, and by this point I'd taken most of my liability off the table, so I could cash out for more or less a break-even trade. A little bit annoying because again this was another game which I didn't think would have more than 2.5 goals at the time when cashing out, but this is just always been the best way to do this strategy, in my opinion. At half time, I did put a speculative back bet on Tunisia to win, mainly because I thought that in the second half, Tunisia would really up the pressure, knowing that they really need to get something from this game. So I thought that maybe in that first 20 minutes or so, they could get the equaliser and then I could cash out for a profit. In the end, it didn't come to fruition. The game finished 1-0 to Australia. But it's okay to lose just a small stake when you're backing on outsiders. You're not going to win as often as you are when you're backing on shorter priced events. So let's move on to the next game. The next game was Poland versus Saudi Arabia, and this was another game which I thought was suitable for the under 2.5 goal strategy. The odds were decent, but the main reason for this was just due to the way that Poland play. They were quite passive in their press, so I thought that it was going to be a case where they would be sitting back and then it would be down to Saudi Arabia to take the initiative in the game, and them would be the ones controlling the possession, creating the chances. And I thought that the attacking options for Saudi Arabia weren't that strong, so it gave the chance that the game wouldn't have many goals early on. Poland looking to counter and Saudi Arabia not strong enough to get the goals. So great opportunity for an under 2.5 goal trade to make profit in the early stages of matches, which is what I did in that first 15 or so minutes in the game. On around the 35th minute mark, I put in a speculative bet on over 1.5 first half goals, risking £2 for a potential £38 worth of profit. I did this because I thought that the game was opening up more and more. Saudi Arabia's chances that they were creating were much better than the ones they were creating earlier in the match, but also Poland were looking more and more dangerous when they countered and went up the other end of the pitch. The other reason I placed this back bet in is because I knew there'd be quite a lot of added time on in this first half, so I had much longer than just the 10 minutes of regulation time for this bet to become profitable. Poland went up the pitch on a counter and scored to take the 1-0 lead. At this point I had 6 minutes of regulation time plus 10 minutes of stoppage time for either team to get the second goal in the game, which would have got me £38 of profit. And I thought that I'd hit the jackpot when Poland give away a penalty to Saudi Arabia. I thought this was going to be a nice big profit relative to the tiny stake that I'd used, but sadly Poland keeper Szczesny ended up saving the Saudi Arabian penalty, and that was very, very annoying. And with the extra 10 minutes of stoppage time, neither team could get the second goal. So that was a bit disappointing, but what can you do, eh? The third game of the day was France versus Denmark. This is one of the stronger group game matches on paper. I had quite high expectations for Denmark going into this tournament, as I bet £100 on their first game, which they let me down on. But just given their performance in that game, and plus their passive three at the back formation that they were going to play against France, I thought they were walking into a pretty convincing trap here that France were going to set, and we're going to win this game easily, is what I thought. So I placed a £100 back bet on France to win this game for £88 of profit. France took the lead in the game. I could have cashed out for £45 worth of profit, but I was seeing no real threat from Denmark, to be honest, to make me concerned about this position, so I decided to leave it open. And lo and behold, Denmark did end up equalising. So this was quite annoying, and it gave me not much time, well, it gave France not much time to get the winning goal in order for me to win my bet. France did get the winning goal. I think they deserved to win this game as well, and it was a nice £88 worth of profit. And in the final game of the day, it was Argentina versus Mexico. And in the lead up to this game, I was sort of caught up in two minds on whether either team would value. I decided that neither team were either back value or lay value for this game, so I was just going to watch the game in play and see if any opportunities presented themselves. And the only position that I took was once the game was 1-0 to Argentina, it looked like both teams were resigned to the fact that the game was finished 1-0. Mexico didn't look dangerous at all throughout the 90 minutes, and Argentina was sort of not really pushing for that second goal. They were sort of just saying, let's just take the 1-0 and run from this game. So I placed a unders trade and under 1.5 goals, meaning I couldn't have any more goals scored in the game. Argentina scored a second goal, and it caused me to lose my £25 back bet. So at the end of the day, I recovered a little bit of my losses that I made in the previous days. My end profit here was a little bit higher compared to the actual positions I won, because this is one of those times where my 101 strategy picked up a couple of wins. Again, there's a link in the description below if you want to know more about that strategy. On to day 8 now, and that started with Japan versus Costa Rica. Given Japan's victory in the first game against Germany, they were in a very strong position to qualify from this group. But what I've seen often when a team gets a shock win like this and then needs to back it up by beating a lesser opponent, a lot of the time complacency can sneak into the team's performance and they can struggle to get that backup win compared to the big shock they had in the previous game. So sort of expecting that to happen here. I still thought Japan would win, but I thought that they would struggle in this opening period of the game, setting itself up nicely for an under 2.5 goal trade at pretty decent odds. As shown in the attack momentum that I'm showing on screen now, my opinions about this game showed to be fairly accurate. Japan was struggling to break down this Costa Rica team, and I was able to walk away with a nice profit from this under 2.5 goal trade. During the second half of the game, Japan seemed to realise the importance of this game and really started to up the pressure on the Costa Rican defence. I'm showing you the attack momentum now. You can see how much more pressure they were applying in the second half compared to the first half. Costa Rica's defending appeared to be more and more last ditch, so I decided to open up a back position on Japan to win this game. I thought it was only a matter of time before Japan got the winner. But shockingly, out of nowhere, Costa Rica ended up going up the other end of the pitch and taking the lead 1-0. This was a pretty annoying losing bet. I feel like I did everything right in this particular position, but you can't really get that upset about it. Sometimes you're going to place bets on teams that deserve to win and then not win, and sometimes you're going to place bets on teams that don't deserve to win and you get lucky and you get the win. So it's not the end of the world. I'm happy now to move on to the next game. So speaking of lucky bets, remember earlier in the video when I had that lucky win on Belgium against Canada? Well, it was Belgium's turn again, and it was against Morocco this time. The more and more I thought about the Belgium versus Canada game, the more and more I thought it was just an absolute fluke, where Canada had the game of their life and Belgium were just absolutely abysmal. But despite Canada having the game of their lives, they still lost the game and Belgium still won. So I thought Belgium would go into this game and look for a much more disciplined performance, a much better performance, and they'd sort of kickstart their tournament here. They could put that Canada performance behind them. I think that the market had overreacted here, given the bad performance they put in against Canada. The odds were much higher than they probably should have been. People were overestimating the importance of that one game. So that's why I was happy to place a back bet on Belgium at these high odds. And clearly I hadn't learned my lesson about backing on Belgium, because they went on to lose this game. So it was very, very funny, I guess. Deserved, considering my poor bet in the first game. It's come back here, and I probably deserve to lose this bet, to be honest. But after that bet, it made me more confident on one thing, and that was that Canada are really not that good, considering that Canada didn't beat Belgium. And given that Belgium did win that game and they were just as abysmal against Morocco and deservedly lost that game, I think people now were thinking that Canada were much better than they are, and it's actually Belgium who were just terrible. And this made sense given the performances that I'd watched Canada play in the lead up to this tournament. So the next game, Croatia versus Canada, I thought this was unbelievable value on Croatia to win this game. Croatia were going to dominate this game in midfield. I was fairly convinced of that. I thought the odds on Croatia were only so high because of that performance Canada put in against Belgium. This was one of the most confident positions I had throughout the entire tournament, that Croatia were going to win this game. I considered staking up to even £200 or £300, but I decided to keep it sensible and stick with, I think it was a £100 stake. And lo and behold, 2 minutes into the game, Canada ended up scoring, which was just hilarious. But when you back on a team, if they're going to concede, the best time for them to concede is as early as possible, because that gives the team that you've bet on the most amount of time to get back in the game. I wasn't really that concerned about Croatia not getting back into this game. I thought the quality of their players would just stand out over the 90 minutes and it would just be too much for Canada to handle. And in the end, that turned out to be true. Canada ended up winning the game 4-1. And in the end, it was a comfortable bet to make. I also made a little bit of profit back in the any other correct score 4-1 market that you can find on Betfair. I did this at pretty small odds, but I did it because Canada were going gung-ho late on in the game, despite being 3-1 down, and it was making them look very open for a counter-attack. And the quality of Croatian players, I thought that they had a good chance of getting that fourth goal. So I made a little nice extra bit of profit there as well, because the game did finish 4-1. And now on to the final group game of the day, and that was the headline group game, so to speak, of this tournament. That was Spain versus Germany. The market was forecasting goals to be scored in this game with an under 2.5 goal price of 2.12. It was somewhat understandable that the odds would be so high, given that the quality of the players on the pitch. Thinking about the tactical setups of either team, I didn't really see that many goals in this game. So this is a perfect opportunity for an under 2.5 goal trade. So I entered into that, did my usual thing of cashing out the liability gradually over time. And then I had a position where I had a £56 free bet on under 2.5 goals. By the end of the game, I ended up cashing this out for, I think, a £50 guaranteed profit, no matter how many goals were scored, which I'm glad I did because it went to 1-1. And, you know, either team could have got that winner then. It would have been annoying to not get that £56 of profit if I just left it as a free bet if that third goal came. The third goal didn't come, so I had a guaranteed profit anyway at this point. It was a nice £50 profit on something that was reasonably safe. So on a day where I lost £50 betting on Japan and £100 betting on Belgium, I actually made £78 overall. So it's not that bad really. It could have been much, much worse if a couple of other things didn't go my way. I had a busy day in real life now on day 9, so my betting on this day wasn't as much as it has been on previous days. It started out with the Serbia versus Cameroon game. I completely just missed this game altogether, which is slightly annoying given that it finished 3-3. It looked like quite an exciting game. The next game of the day was between South Korea and Ghana. I actually thought that both teams had goals in their game, and it was a bit harsh that the market was pricing goals not to be scored so short. I actually think there was going to be goals in this game, so I placed a back bet on over 2.5 goals or lay bet on under 2.5 goals. I can't quite remember. They're both doing essentially the same thing. I did expect that both teams had enough quality to score goals, and when I went to look at the score, I saw that Ghana had raced into a 2-goal lead, which is very good for me. I got the goals that I needed. I needed one more to get a fully profitable trade. I decided that I would cash out just because I didn't want the game to just stagnate and go all the way to 2-0. So I just decided to cash out and take the profit on offer, which was pretty good given the stake that I'd used. South Korea potentially had the tournament on the line in this game, so I thought they would really push to try and get back in the game despite being 2-0 down. So I placed a lay bet on Ghana to win this game, risking £8 for a potential £50 worth of profit. But as I was busy, I wasn't able to watch this game, and by the time I come to check the score, I saw that it had gone 3-2 to Ghana, and not only that, it had actually gone 2-2 before it went to 3-2. And the odds for Ghana drifted out to 4.4, so I would have got a massive profit there if I'd been present at the time and had been able to cash out. So it's quite annoying that I missed that, but I don't mind. It was just an outright bet more than an active position, and I still think it was a good value position given how much South Korea needed to get the goals to get back in this game. Next up, it was Brazil versus Switzerland, and I did really like Switzerland, and I looked at the underlying stats of both teams and believe that Switzerland were going to cause Brazil some problems in this match. At this point in the tournament, it seemed that a lot of people were placing far too much money on Brazil. Both in this match and in the outright market, people were jumping on the Brazil bandwagon. I didn't really see it, and I thought that Brazil's price for the match had come too short at 1.52. I thought this was good lay value, and that's what I did. I placed a lay bet on Brazil, hoping that either the game would finish a draw or Switzerland would get that first goal, allowing me to cash out. The game was panning out how I expected it to do, in that Brazil was struggling to really create a lot of chances and break down this tough Switzerland side. And I could have cashed out, taken a profit, but decided to hold on because Brazil weren't really creating any chances. As I somewhat hedged that position, I placed a small back bet on over 2.5 goals, thinking that if either team scored a goal, maybe Brazil, then that would open the game up and allow both teams to have more chances. Maybe there's no chance of a quite entertaining second part of the second half. In the end, Brazil ended up scoring in the 83rd minute with Casemiro. Game finished 1-0, so both my positions in this market turned out to be losers. But it wasn't too bad. I don't really regret laying Brazil in this game. I don't think they were that impressive in the game. And at 1.52, I don't think those odds for Brazil are justified given the performance that we eventually saw. Just as a quick side note here, before the tournament started, I placed a lay bet on Brazil to qualify in this group, mainly just because of how short they were at 1.11. And the group was quite a competitive group. And with tournament football, you know, it's such a short number of games, a little bit of bad luck, bad variance, and you can get eliminated from this group despite being clearly the best team in the group. So I thought it was a good price for a lay bet. After this win here, it was guaranteed that Brazil would be qualified to the next round, so the bet settled. So I'm not really too bothered about that. It was a small risk for quite a big reward if it paid off. It didn't this time, but that's fine. And now on to the final game of the day, and that was Portugal versus Uruguay. I was genuinely unsure about this game. I really didn't know what to think about the odds, but the more and more I watched it, I thought that Uruguay's price is a little bit too big. I thought Portugal deserved to be favourites, but the market was discounting Uruguay's chances to win this game a little bit too much. So I placed a small £10 back bet on Uruguay to win this game because I thought they were creating the better of the chances. The bet ended up going against me. Portugal won this game, and that's a lot of the time is what happens when you're backing on outsiders. You aren't going to win nearly as much. But I still think that the odds that I got on Uruguay to win this game were quite good. The market was a bit wrong here in my opinion. The game was much closer than what it was being suggested it was as. So I made it through 9 days of the tournament without losing all of my money, which I was pretty happy with, and I was also more happy with the sort of psychological equilibrium that I found myself in, where both losing and winning, it wasn't really having that much of a psychological impact on me, which is what I really wanted to get from this tournament. So on to the final round of group stage matches now. So with the third group stage matches, each group's games are played at the same time compared to 4 games at 4 different times. This is understandable so that neither team can get a competitive edge by knowing the result that they need to get before the game kicks off. But it's annoying because it means that 2 games on at the same time, my attention would have to be split or focus entirely on one game, which is usually what I did, just focus on one game, ignoring the other game in the group. So in the first round of fixtures between Ecuador and Senegal and Netherlands and Qatar, I decided that the game to focus on was the Ecuador and Senegal game because the Netherlands and Qatar game was pretty much nothing on it. Netherlands had already confirmed qualification pretty much, and Ecuador and Senegal were playing for who was going to be the team that qualified with Netherlands. So I watched the first 30 minutes or so of this game and saw that it was a tense affair. Ecuador only needed a point to confirm their qualification from the group, and Senegal needed to win. So the game was found a pattern of Ecuador sitting back and defending, and Senegal trying to get the goal and trying to attack. But their attack didn't really look very good, and Ecuador weren't really interested in trying to score, so it was sort of looking like it was going to be a very low scoring game, finishing either 0-0 or maybe either team would nick it 1-0. So after 30 minutes I decided to place a back bet on under 1.5 goals, but sadly the game didn't go exactly according to plan. In the end it finished 2-1, so my opinion here was just not accurate. But I do think over the long term, more often than not, and more often than I needed to be in order to be profitable, the way I thought this game would have played out would have actually ended up playing out. It didn't in this instance, and I had to take the loss, but I wasn't too upset about this losing position. In the second round of fixtures, I actually opened up positions in both games. In the Wales and England match, I was fairly confident that Wales were going to set up in a low block and be very passive in their pressing structure. And this is a type of setup that I've seen England struggle to break down many times in the lead up to this tournament. So although I was fairly convinced that England were going to win this game comfortably in the end, I thought they would have a hard time breaking Wales down, and at odds of 1.87, the under 2.5 goal strategy was very optimal here. I entered in hoping to be in for the first 20 or so minutes and get a nice profit with the time decay, expecting that England wouldn't score in that time. And that's exactly what I did. I walked away with a nice profit there. I also made £40 worth of profit by backing England at half time with a £70 stake. I did this because it just seemed inevitable that England were going to get the goals here. Wales were offering absolutely nothing, and England was starting to look more dangerous towards the end of the first half. That pattern I thought was going to continue, and England were going to get the goal. And they did get the goal. I didn't bother cashing out because I just didn't think Wales had any chance of getting in this game. And to be honest, I did have high expectations of Wales going into this tournament, but after watching their performance against Iran and watching their performance in this game, except from Qatar, they were probably one of the worst teams in the competition. No offence, Wales fans, but be better next time. And in the other game in the group, it was Iran versus USA, and I think people were backing in USA too much. The odds for USA were shorter than they probably should have been, given the stats of both teams and the quality of both teams. So I thought it was a good opportunity to lay the USA at more or less odds of evens. That way I thought that Iran had a good chance of getting the first goal, or the price of USA would drift in play the longer and longer they didn't get the goal. It turned out my opinion about this game was very wrong. It was quite flawed because when I saw the game start, USA were playing much better than I expected. So instead of keeping the position open as just a gamble, I just decided to cash out of the position, taking a small loss because the price had come in, because it looked like USA were going to score. And I was happy to take that small loss, and I'm glad that I did, because USA did end up winning this game, so I saved myself a big loss there. On to day 11 now, and it started with Denmark and France's group. France had already qualified for the competition, so put out a heavily weakened side. I missed this, but you could have got a massive profit with a pre-off trade lay in France and then backing them at the higher price after the team news. Sadly, I missed this happening, but I still thought there was opportunities in this game. I thought that this disjointed French team would struggle to score goals, and I thought that Tunisia, despite knowing that they needed to win, I thought they would not have the quality to break down this, although weakened, still strongish French defence. So I decided to place just an outright back bet on under 2.5 goals. I was busy at the time, so I couldn't monitor the position, actively trade it. This was just an outright bet, and it paid off in the end. The game finished 1-0 to Tunisia, so that was a nice little bit of profit. And I didn't do very much in the Denmark and Australia game. I was very cautious to avoid the trap of Denmark's short odds in this game. I really didn't think they justified that price, but didn't really want to get involved in laying them either. Did place a little bit of a back bet on goals to be scored late on in the game, but nothing ended up happening. It was just a small position to take. I was very excited with the late games. Poland versus Argentina and Mexico versus Saudi Arabia. The reason was that all four teams could still qualify and get to the next stage. So I was sort of expecting some fireworks on tonight's games, with the teams that qualifying changing multiple times across the evening. The best thing I thought to do was to lay both the favourites, that was Argentina against Poland and then Mexico against Saudi Arabia. I would need just one of the two outsiders to score first or to win, and that would balance the loss on the other one. Unfortunately, it wasn't that as exciting as it could have been. Both favourites won fairly comfortably in the end. It was one of them situations where I was happy to lose, backing the outsiders. That's fine, that's going to happen quite a lot. The Poland and Argentina game as well, I thought that Poland's strong defensive structure would have been strong enough to hold off Argentina for quite a while, making the under 2.5 goal trade desirable in this game. I entered in, gradually took my position off, as I've been doing many times in this video already, and despite a dubious penalty decision being awarded, thankfully Argentina missed the penalty and I could get into half time, cashing out with a reasonable profit. Day 12 saw the conclusion of the Croatia and Belgium group. First of all, I should say I didn't even touch the Morocco and Canada game. All my attention was focused on the must-win for either team Croatia versus Belgium game. So I'm not saying must win. Croatia could obviously draw and progress, but Belgium needed to get the 3 points. And games like this, which are really tense and have a lot of light riding on them, tend to not be open affairs with many goals. A lot of the times they tend to be tense affairs with a lack of goals, which is why I entered the under 2.5 goal trade. And I entered the trade with quite high odds of 1.91. And I thought this was very good odds given the other odds that I'd seen for matches in the tournament, and given how tight I expected this game to be. And to be honest, I somewhat bottled this position a little bit. I cashed out far too early than I should have done, so I didn't nearly get as much profit as I probably should have done from this game, which is a bit disappointing, but it's still a profit and I can't complain too much about that. And going into the final 10 or so minutes into this game, it was 0-0 still. Belgium really needed to get a goal. I thought that a good position was a back bet on over 0.5 goals, so that's for either team to score. I thought Belgium were going to push on and trying to get this goal, and I thought they would get this goal at least more than 50% of the time, and it needed to make the position worth doing. The reason I just didn't put a back bet on Belgium is because the more and more that Belgium overcommitted to try and get the goal, the more and more vulnerable it would leave at the back. And Croatia are definitely no slouches. They're a decent team, and I thought there was still a chance that they could get a winning goal on their counter-attack. Despite a handful of chances, mostly from Lukaku, unfortunately there was no goal scored in this game. I wasn't really too concerned. I do think that that was a good value position that I took. Goals more often than not would have been scored in this game, but on this instance I was on the other end of that, and it didn't quite turn out in my favour. Like the Argentina group we just mentioned, the Spain, Germany, Japan and Costa Rica group was also nicely set up, with all 4 teams potentially qualifying from this group. So again, this was another night where there could have been exciting things happening, and it turned out exciting things did happen. But before that, we need to go back to the start of the games, where again I thought Spain were not that good in terms of a clinical point of view. Tactically, they're very, very good, and they would control the possession of this game. I just didn't think that they would create these goals. And this position, which I've maintained throughout all of the tournament that Spain played in, first against Costa Rica, where I was wrong, then against Germany, where I was right in thinking that they wouldn't score many, they scored 1. And in this game, again, I went in with an under 2.5 goal trade, expecting Spain to struggle to break down Japan in the first 20 minutes. And once again, like the Costa Rica game, I was wrong, and Spain got an early goal. And at this point, I did something a bit weird. And I've looked back at my notes in preparation of this video, and I'm not entirely sure why I did this. But I opened 2 concurrent positions. One was a back bet on both teams not to score, risking £100 for £86 of profit. And the other was a lay bet on any other home win for Spain. This is the same thing that I did in the Spain versus Costa Rica match, but this time my lay bet on Spain any other home win, i.e. to win by 4 or more goals, was at much higher odds than it was in that Costa Rica match. Essentially what I thought would happen is that at 1-0 Spain would be happy to just pass it around, control the possession, and the game more often than not would just finish 1-0. So why I decided to open these 2 different positions of laying both teams to score and then laying against a big Spain 4-0 plus win, I'm not entirely sure why I did that. But in the end, the game finished 2-1 to Japan, and obviously my both teams to score bet was down the drain. That was a £100 loss. But the laying of any other home win market was a profitable bet, and that got me £88, so I netted £12 loss on those 2 positions. Very, very weird. I don't know why I did that. I wish I made more clear notes to explain my stupid decision making at the time. I did do one more position in this match as well, and that was when Spain scored their second goal. I saw a replay at the time and it looked very much like the ball had gone out of play. I saw this and I saw that Japan's odds had decreased a lot because they thought that a goal was going to be given. I thought for sure that the ball went out of play, so I decided to lay Japan, thinking that once the goal would not be given, that the price would move back out and I could cash out for a quick profit there. But the goal was given. Geometry and my stupid brain cost me this position. Once it realised that the goal was going to get given, I cashed out immediately. Didn't want to take that position on. This was one of the strangest bets I've ever done in my life. Don't be overconfident looking at replays, and don't make stupid bets like that. But it was just a small loss. Oh well. And the last thing to mention about this group is I didn't trade the Germany versus Costa Rica match. However, before the tournament kicked off, I did have a lay bet on both Spain and Germany to qualify from this group. Similar to what I mentioned earlier in the Brazil lay bet in the same market to qualify. I thought 2 teams in a group also containing that Japan team, which is a tough team. I thought given the variance and the nature of tournament group stage football, both teams, Spain and Germany, didn't deserve to be such short odds. I thought it was more or less impossible that they both wouldn't qualify, but there was a very big chance that one of them wouldn't qualify. As it so happened, it was Germany. Germany didn't qualify. Spain did qualify, but the loss in Spain was more than enough to cover for the win on Germany. So it was a nice, simple position, which I'm guessing so many traders out there had that very same position, a lay bet on Spain and a lay bet on Germany. Day 12 was a little bit crazy, as I've just mentioned, but yeah, despite a £100 loss and a £40 loss, I ended up getting a £30 overall loss, which isn't that bad really, considering how bad it looked like it was going to be at some points in the session. Final day of the group stages started off with Portugal and Uruguay's group. I was in the process of moving house, so I wasn't really having the time to be trading and betting on these games, but I did do a couple of positions across the early games and the later games. The first one was a lay bet on Uruguay. They were 2-0 up, but their odds were short. Doing this is a nice strategy that I like to do, laying the favourite when they're winning. I think their odds are so short and you can hold the position for a very long time and cash out if you want, and the odds won't move too much against you because there's not much the odds can actually move against you. But I thought that knowing that Ghana needed to get something from this game, needed the win, I thought they would come out and try and get goals back in the game. Yes, they could probably then lose by more, but at those short odds, the risk versus reward, it makes sense to lay Uruguay. It didn't work out this time, and I had to take the loss. And the other game in the group I didn't trade, that was Portugal versus South Korea. So, on to the evening kickoffs on the last day of the group stages, and the final two group games were Cameroon versus Brazil and Serbia versus Switzerland. As I was in the process of moving, I wasn't able to watch either of these games. I would have liked to watch Serbia and Switzerland. I thought that was going to be an entertaining game. It was. It finished 3-3. But I didn't have any positions on that because I wanted to watch and have positions rather than I couldn't think of anything pre-off for it. But the Brazil versus Cameroon game, I was convinced that Brazil's price again was too short. I've pretty much done this on every position, thinking that Brazil would struggle. And I thought that again here. Brazil were getting lots of money put on them. But because they'd already guaranteed qualification, they rotated quite a number of players. Cameroon needed to get the victory, and the odds it just made sense here for a Brazil lay bet. Laying the favourite has been quite a profitable strategy at this World Cup because a lot of outsiders have had shock wins. And in this instance, I was on the right end of that as Brazil lost this game 1-0, and I got a nice profit. So that ends the group stage section, and it was now on to the knockout stages. With the group stages out of the way, it was on to the last 16, and as you can see, at this moment in time, I was very excited about the last 16 because this is probably the first time in my life where England were genuinely one of the best teams in the competition. Not just people in England thinking they were one of the best teams, but they were actually one of the best teams. Generally speaking, I'm not a big fan once the competition gets into the round of 16, quarterfinals, semi-finals. I much prefer the group stage element of the competition. It's because most people in the markets are less familiar with the teams. Once we get to these latter stages, more and more people are more familiar with the teams, and the markets tend to become more efficient than they were towards the early stages of the competition. That being said, there are definitely still opportunities out there, and here are the bets that I placed in the knockout stages of the competition. The first round of 16 match was the Netherlands versus the USA. I had a look at the odds before the game and nothing really was standing out to me. I really didn't think that the Netherlands had been too impressive throughout the tournament so far, but I didn't really find much lay value in the odds that they started the game at. The game did go 2-0 to the Netherlands in play, and at half-time I placed a lay bet on the Netherlands. This is quite speculative. I was sort of hoping that with the USA's tournament life on the line that they'd come back into this game in the second half, apply a lot of pressure and try and get back in the game, and I'd maybe to cash out for a small, nice little profit. USA did get back into the game at 2-1, but at this point the cash out wasn't very good, and then I was hoping the USA could get another goal, but unfortunately the Netherlands scored another to make the game 3-1, and this was a losing position. Next up was Argentina versus Australia, and I thought that Australia's defensive setup was really going to cause them a problem against Argentina. I thought this game would play very similar to the Argentina versus Poland game in the group stages, where Argentina dominated the game. They only ended up winning 2-0 in the end, but they absolutely dominated the game. I thought the game would play out like that, but it would be a much more convincing win for Argentina because Poland's players are better than Argentina's players. So I was walking into this game thinking it would be a comfortable 4-0 or 5-0 victory for Argentina. With that in mind, I was shocked to see the under 2.5 goals odds so short, so I placed a back bet on over 2.5 goals for this game with quite a high stake, £125 stake. But once the game went in play, it played out incredibly differently to how I expected it. Australia didn't approach the game with this defensive setup. They actually had initiated a high press, and that was really causing Argentina problems. In hindsight, once I realised that the game was playing out differently to how I expected it to play out, I really should have cashed out of this position. At the time, I didn't. I rationalised this by saying with Australia pressing, it made Australia more likely to get a goal, but it also made Argentina more likely to play through the press and also score themselves. But in hindsight, I think this was a mistake. I really should have cashed out of this position. Thankfully, the game did have 3 goals scored in the game, so I was able to settle this bet as a winner. After Australia scored and the game became 2-1, I placed a lay bet at odds of 1.08 on Argentina. I really liked the pressure that Australia were applying in the last 10 minutes or so in the game, and it really looked more likely than the odds suggested that Australia would get an equaliser in this game. Despite two golden opportunities late on for Australia, they didn't manage to get that equaliser, and this bet settled as a loss. But coming out of this game, Argentina was so unimpressive. They really were not one of the top teams in this competition, in my opinion. This match just proved that, really, and I thought they would struggle going forward. At this point in the competition, it became apparent that France were definitely one of the best teams remaining in the competition. But the thing is about France, it's very interesting the way that they play. They don't press at all, and instead rely on moments and individual quality from the great players that they have in their team. It means that a lot of the times they aren't sustaining long periods of attack and putting defences under pressure. They're just scoring and creating in moments, which is completely fine at international level. But this type of play makes goals less likely to be scored in games, which makes the under 2.5 goal strategy very appealing, which is what I initiated for this match. By the time I had managed to fully cash out of this position, France did get the opening goal, so I was quite lucky with my exit point here. But even if France scored just before I fully cashed out of this position, I'd already taken so much of my liability off the table that I would have been able to cash out for a profit anyway, just a significantly smaller profit than the one I eventually did. After the game went 2-0 to France, I placed a lay bet on France at odds of 102. This was quite speculative, hoping Poland could summon something up and then use the change in momentum to try and maybe get another goal in the game. It was very unlikely, but at short odds, it's very little risk involved. Sadly, this never came to fruition, and it was another losing position. It was my beloved England's turn next, and they were placing Senegal in the round of 16. Pretty much everybody in the markets was expecting this to be a tight, low-scoring affair, and I tended to agree with that opinion. The under 2.5 goals odds were very short. I still believe there's an opportunity to pick up a little bit of profit in the opening 10 or so minutes in this game through the time decay, even though the market was starting at these such short odds. I did manage to do that and got a little bit of profit from this match. I tend to cash out around the odds of 1.4 when I'm using this strategy, because that's when the time decay, the odds contracting starts to go really slow, and I don't really see the benefit for holding the position much longer. So I was happy with this position. I'm very happy because in the end the game ended up finishing 3-0. So that's why I do like to do the cashing out version of this strategy, rather than just having outright back bets. At 2-0 at half time, I did the unthinkable and laid my own team to win. I laid England to win. Yes, they were 2-0, but the way that England were playing, they were playing a 4-3-3, but that turned into a 3-1-6 in possession. And this formation wasn't looking too great on the night, to be honest, and it was giving Senegal many chances in the match, and they had two very good opportunities in the game, and they could have scored both of them, really. So I was sort of thinking that more of the same could happen in the second half, and England's odds were very short, and then one goal and the market would completely flip and people would be starting to panic. So I was happy to place a lay bet against my own team here for those reasons, and it went 3-0, so this was another losing position. Once the game was 3-0, I did pick up a little bit of extra profit, scalping no more goals to be scored in the game. No more goals were scored, so it's always nice to pick up that little extra bit of profit late on in the game. In the Japan versus Croatia game, I sort of had a bit of decision paralysis. I really couldn't decide what I wanted to do in this game. I thought it was a very tight game. So I decided to let the game go in play and see if any opportunities presented themselves in play. And one of them did, in fact. Once Japan took the lead in the market, I believe that the under 2.5 goal market overreacted to this situation. It thought goals were more likely to be scored than they actually were, 2 more goals in the game. So I went in for a very, very short period of time to take a small profit from this market, capitalising on that overreaction in the odds, which you can see from the Betfair chart I'm showing on screen now. Brazil had a comparatively easy round of 16 fixture compared to some of the top teams. He was only playing South Korea. But as I had been doing for quite a lot of the Brazil games throughout this tournament, like I did against Switzerland and like I did against Cameroon, I placed a lay bet on Brazil to win this game against South Korea. I just really thought that throughout this entire tournament, people were betting far too much on Brazil to win this game. I don't know if that was just an emotional thing, but it definitely didn't seem to be a logical thing. Clearly, Brazil were outstanding and were very much deserving to be favourites in this game against South Korea, but the odds are so short in a knockout football competition match like this. I really didn't see it. So that's why I placed a lay bet on Brazil here. The bet was over pretty much straight away really as Brazil raced into a 4-0 lead. But I don't really mind too much with that lay bet. I did still think that Brazil's price was too short. The Spain and Morocco game was a very tough game to bet on. I looked at the odds and Spain's odds were probably a bit too short, but I didn't really fancy backing them either. I had a bit of trouble with Spain for it this entire tournament. I kept seeming to lose on the matches. I really just wanted to see how this game would pan out. Spain were obviously favourites, but Morocco were a very decent team, and I still believe that I've mentioned earlier in this video that Spain lacked that clinical presence up front which could get them through these tight, difficult games like this. Once I was watching, to me it became apparent that Moroccan's defence was effectively nullifying Spain's attack, and Morocco weren't really committing too much forward to try and win the game. It looked like they was playing for extra time. So it just looked like the game was petering out to be a 0-0. Capitalised on this by placing a back bet and under 0.5 goals. I did this at odds of 2. And then I eventually cashed out this position at odds of about 1.4 because I think at this point 1.4 truly reflected approximately how much of a chance there was of a late goal being scored in the game. Plus the time decay is very slow when the odds are so short. So you're not getting that much value with the odds moving tick by tick very quickly. You either leave it as an outright bet or cash out around this time, in my opinion. That's what I did. Didn't get the maximum profit. The game did finish 0-0, but I was fine taking the profit on offer there. And this was the end of Spain's run in the tournament. They were beaten by Morocco on penalties. Next up, it was Portugal versus Switzerland. This is one of the games that I've made the most amount of mess on, in all honesty. So let's break down the positions that I opened up on this game. The first thing I should say is that I placed these bets after I had finished work. It was just before I was about to drive home from work. So I knew by the time I got home from work, it would be half time. Just before I set off, I placed 2 back bets in and then I tracked them to see how they went when I got home at half time. So this is a bit of a risky position to take and a bit of a strange thing to do. I sort of probably wouldn't have done anything like this if I wasn't making a video like this. I was sort of trying to place as many bets as possible. But I did still like the bets that I did place, and I did think that there was good reasons to place these bets. The first one was a lay bet on Portugal. I think Portugal tactically were a very flawed team. They were very unbalanced and were really there for the taking by any competent team. And that's what I thought Switzerland were. I thought they were a competent team who could deliver a shock, to some extent, defeat here to Portugal. Yes, the Switzerland team did lack goals, but they had a much more better balance in the game, and I think it'd be a close game, and even if Switzerland didn't win, there's also a chance it could be a draw and then go into extra time, and that'd settle the bet as a win as well. And the other bet I placed was an under 2.5 goal trade. Similar reasons to what I just mentioned on the lay bet, especially Switzerland really did lack the goals, and Portugal also not playing Ronaldo, and yes, a lot of negativity around Ronaldo, but the other guy who's come in I hadn't heard of. I didn't know how he would react on his debut. So it was a difficult place to see where the goals would come from this game. I was really expecting a tight game. Unfortunately, by the time I got home, I opened up my phone, looked on Betfair, and saw a screen of red. Game was 2-0 at half time. So this was pretty much the worst case scenario for both positions. In the under 2.5 goal trade, if it was either 0-0 or 1-0 to either team at half time, I would have been able to cash out for a profit. But it was 2-0, and it was 2-0 to Portugal. So that means my lay bet on Portugal looked pretty much dead in the water as well at 2-0. I cashed out of the under 2.5 goal trade because with Switzerland having to come out in that second half to try and force the way back into the game, I felt there was no way that the game would finish 2-0. But I kept the lay bet open on Portugal just as an outside chance that maybe Switzerland do get back in the game. In that second half, it went 3-0 to Portugal, and I believe that the market significantly overreacted on the any other home win market, about odds of 1.6, 1.7. I've got it up on screen, I can't remember exactly what it was. I thought at 3-0, Portugal wouldn't have that appetite to go on and push for more and more goals. They will be happy with the 3-0 and slightly cautious just in case Switzerland did get a goal, and maybe that would change the momentum and they could get maybe another quick goal and put Portugal into real pressure towards the end of the game. So I thought that they'd be happy with the 3-0 and that the market had significantly overreacted with these short odds for Portugal scoring and winning this game by 4 or more goals. And unfortunately, not long after placing the bet, Portugal did score another goal, a 4th goal. In the end, the game finished 6-1, so this was just a really poor bet here. My reading of the situation was completely wrong. In all honesty, I think that Switzerland were a decent team, but once they were down 2-0 and trying to chase this game, the game just sort of ran away from them. And to be honest, the game wasn't a true reflection of the overall quality of both teams. The reason Portugal got into a 2-0 lead was a goal off a set piece and a really good individual goal by Ramos. So I think on a different day, this game would have turned out completely different. Both my under 2.5 goal trade and the lay bet on Portugal would have paid off, but it wasn't to be this time. Having said that, I did manage to make a little bit of money in the unders market, so I placed a pretty big bet on the under 7.5 goal market. I wasn't in this position for too long. I managed to cash out, leaving a free bet position, which came in as there was under 7.5 goals. And to be honest, this was the first time where I really felt like I was chasing losses, which is obviously an awful thing to do, which I don't think it happened at any other point in the tournament, but I was really upset that it happened here and let that happen here. It wasn't completely terrible, everything felt in control and there was never too much money at risk, but I really should have just sat back and watched the end of the game play out instead of jumping in, trying to get more and more positions, trying to win the money back, which I'd lost on the earlier markets. But I'm glad I did it and I noticed it as quick as possible, and I did decide to just cash out of the position rather than just leaving it and saying, oh, I'll just may as well leave it and try and get as much money as possible. I cashed out, taking the profit there when it could have been much more if I'd left it a little bit longer. My decision making was a little bit erratic there, but oh well. Let's move on to the next game, and the next game was the start of the quarter-finals. The first quarter-final was Croatia versus Brazil, and as I keep saying throughout this video, Brazil were too short again, in my opinion, in this market. People were really on the bandwagon now, really thinking they were going to go on and win this tournament, and I think that Croatia are definitely a decent side. They obviously don't have the footballing quality of a team like Brazil, but go into this tournament with a strategy of trying to make games go as long as possible, into extra time, into penalties, and win the hard way. And I've got nothing against that. They were doing it magnificently, in my opinion. I definitely needed some luck in this position because if Brazil scored in the first half, I thought the lay bet here on Brazil to qualify would be pretty much dead in the water. Brazil would be nice and comfortable winning this game, with Croatia trying to get back into the game, pushing forward and making Brazil ever so more dangerous on the counter-attack. But as the game was going on and on, it started to become apparent to me that the team with the most elite midfield, which in this case, in my opinion, was Croatia, was getting the advantage of the game, taking the control away from Brazil. It looked like the game was drifting to 0-0, which it did go to 0-0. And when it was 0-0 at full time, the odds on Brazil to qualify were still, in my opinion, demonstrably too small. I don't know why they were still so short. I didn't want to cash out of my position. I was happy to keep the position open longer because I thought Croatia now had the upper advantage in this extra time and I fancied Croatia to win on penalties. So I decided to keep the lay bet open on the Brazil to qualify, but unfortunately Brazil ended up scoring a brilliant goal through Neymar. I wasn't too happy about that, but I wasn't too concerned either. Obviously, I could have cashed out, but I'd have left the position open. And very thankfully, Croatia ended up scoring an equaliser in the 117th minute, and the game finished 1-1. And now I had a decision to make. I decided that even though I still did fancy Croatia to win the penalty shootout, I would cash out of the position because I didn't want to risk the liability I had on more or less a 50-50, which is what a penalty shootout is. So I did a cash out free bet situation where I would win if Croatia won the penalty shootout and break even in Brazil won, and Brazil ended up losing. Unfortunately for them, the favourites were out and Croatia were through to a consecutive semi-final at 2 World Cups. Congratulations to them. The second quarter-final of the day was the Netherlands versus Argentina. Before the start of the tournament, I really had high expectations for both of these teams. But to be honest, the more and more I saw, the more and more concerned I was about both of these teams. They were both, in my opinion, not very good at all tactically. They were just getting where they got to through individual quality of players and were very, very gettable. If a big team come at them, I think they would really demolish both of these teams. I thought this would be a game with the glaring tactical flaws that both teams would have, that there'd be many errors in the defensive areas, and both teams would be able to capitalise on the errors because they do have strong individual players, and there'd be lots of goals for both teams. So I was really surprised when I saw the under 2.5 goal market was priced so short. I placed a back bet on over 2.5 goals earlier in the day because I thought the price would come in a little bit closer to kick-off, Unfortunately, by the time it was close to kick off, the opposite had happened. It actually drifted out a bit. But I was still happy with the reasonings for opening the position. I was happy to let the bet run in play. But I ended up cashing out of this bet because, to be honest, it looked like the game wasn't exactly playing out how I thought it was. I cashed out for a more or less a break-even position. It looked like more of a much tighter game. So it looked like, once again, the market had got the odds correct and I was wrong. So I cashed out and decided to do an opposite type of trade, and that was at 1-0 to place a back bet on under 1.5 goals, meaning no more goals would be scored. This was entirely down to the attack momentum more or less through the entire game, really. Both teams were really not doing very well and not creating many chances. Not having this under position open for very long, and Argentina got a penalty. And my luck on backing these under 0.5 goals or under 1.5 goal markets throughout this World Cup tournament was pretty atrocious, really. Many times I'd be backing about 1.8, 1.9, 2.0, maybe a little bit higher, and I'd be losing so often on this position. And this was another time where I did lose because Argentina scored the penalty. Even more annoyingly for me, the game ended up finishing 2-2, so my original back bet on over 2.5 goals would have come in if I'd just been patient and left it. But I don't have too much regrets because I still believe at the time it did feel like the right cash out to do, because I didn't expect what was going to happen, that the game was finished 2-2. But having said that, I did place a lay bet on Argentina at odds of 1.03. This is when they were 2-0 up. I mean, the tactical flaws of Argentina, they deserve to lose this game, to be honest with you. The way they were playing when they were 2-0 up was astonishingly poor. They may as well have just said to Argentina, here's the ball, score a goal. Do it, you may as well do it. But that's how bad Argentina were playing. The game did go 2-2, and this lay bet on Argentina was profitable. My only regret is I didn't go in with a much bigger stake, because risking pennies here to win £20, I could have gone with a £100 stake, risked £3, won £100. That was one of my big regrets here. I really should have done that. And then in extra time, I made a little bit of profit scalping Argentina to qualify. That was weighing Argentina and then backing them at a slightly higher price. So I made a couple of quid there. So I only managed about £23 worth of profit from day one of the quarterfinals, which was quite disappointing given the potential profit I could have had if I'd been patient on my positions. And that leads us on to day two of the quarterfinals, starting with Morocco versus Portugal. This was one of the times where I thought the market was really priced very strangely. I couldn't really understand why Portugal were priced so short as they were. I think people were just looking and thinking Portugal were a big team, Morocco are not, therefore Portugal are going to win. The flaws of Portugal I mentioned earlier about them being so unbalanced, I thought had a good chance of costing them here. Morocco are a very good, sound tactical team that were going to cause Portugal a lot of problems. I thought the game would play out quite similar to the Spain versus Morocco game, but Morocco would create a lot more chances because they're playing Portugal, and Portugal are much worse than Spain in my opinion. So I placed a back bet on Morocco to win this game. Typical bet on the outsider. Scaled the back my stakes, placed a back bet, and Morocco got the opening goal, and the odds for Morocco came in. I had a decision to make whether I should cash out or not, and I decided to cash out because I thought at the time of the goal, the updated odds did pretty much accurately reflect the probability of all the outcomes taking place, either a Morocco win, Portugal win, or the draw. I cashed out for just over £20 worth of profit. Obviously, in the end, Morocco went on to win the game 1-0, but I'm not too bothered about cashing out. I think it was the right decision, especially given how much pressure Portugal were putting on Morocco towards the end of the game. It never really looked too dangerous, but it was dangerous enough that it could have happened, and I didn't want to take the loss here. I was happy with the profit that I got. And the final game of the quarterfinals was my team England up against world champions France. Given the way that the quarterfinals had gone so far, I genuinely believe that England and France were the only two elite teams remaining in the competition. So this felt like an absolutely massive game. Essentially, the winner here had an enormously strong chance of going on to win the World Cup. I didn't end up betting in this game because I was just so emotionally invested in it. But I did look at the market beforehand, and I was shocked to see the under 2.5 goal market so short. I don't understand how this came to be. It seemed very, very unusual to me, considering the likelihood that both teams would score goals in this game, especially given the formations and the players both teams had selected. So that was unusual. But as I said, I was emotionally invested and didn't want to bet on the market. I was actually arrogantly, almost delusionally confident that England were going to win this game. Maybe not to win the game, but qualify. England's strong tactical versatility compared to France's poor tactical predictability, plus Gareth's 11 that he played and the formation that he played. I genuinely believe that was the best team that we could have put out there to beat France. I really did think that England did have the edge to win this game, and in the qualifying markets it was close to about evens upon kickoff. In the end, it turned out to be heartbreak for England. I watched the game back again the day after and it confirmed everything I'd seen the night before. England absolutely dominated the game in large parts. Henderson, Bellingham, and in particular Rice absolutely controlled the midfield from start to finish. Kane played great in the game, yes, despite the missed penalty. And the one thing that I really hope the English learn and take away from this tournament is, you know, a lot of people talk about the likes of Grealish and the likes of Foden. But from this tournament, I really hope that the uneducated British press finally acknowledge that Bukayo Saka is by far the best winger the English have. Hopefully that'll take place, but you never know. The English media are pretty dumb. Sorry for talking about this game for so long, especially considering I didn't actually have a bet on it, but this game was absolutely devastating to me. This is probably the first time, I think, in my life, and the first time in decades, where England are probably the best team remaining in the competition, but ended up getting eliminated. But oh well, what can you do? Let's move on to the semi-finals. The quarter-finals out of the way, that leaves us with the final four: France, Argentina, Croatia and Morocco. And generally, all four of these teams did have a decent chance of going on to win this tournament, including Morocco. Personally, at this point, I thought France were the only elite team remaining in the competition. They weren't tactically the greatest of teams, but they had that so much individual quality across the park that they could win the game with a moment at any point in time. As I've mentioned a few times in the video, I did think that Argentina did have some pretty deep tactical flaws, but they would have fancied their chances in this first semi-final against Croatia. Argentina have been the team, like the XG kings of this competition, creating a lot of XG and conceding very little. However, I think those stats were sort of plastering over the problems of the team. But a team like Croatia, in the way that they set up, I don't really think this was the best type of team that had the best chance of winning against Argentina. I think a team's tactical approach more similar towards Australia, the way they pressed Argentina in possession. I thought that was a much better approach and a much more likely way to win. Against Argentina, Croatia weren't going to do that. This is why Argentina has such a good chance of winning this competition, because the remaining three other teams in the competition don't initiate high press effectively. So Argentina's playstyle had a good chance of beating Croatia and also beating the winner of France versus Morocco. But Croatia definitely do have something about them. They got to the final last time and that midfield is elite and given enough time can start to control a game. So the game very much depended on how it would play out. The longer the game stayed 0-0, or if Croatia could nick a goal, then Croatia would be in a really strong position. But as soon as Argentina scored an opening goal, it would be pretty much game over in my opinion, because Croatia are nowhere near good enough from an attacking point of view to get back into the game. They'd easily have more chance of conceding a second compared to scoring an equaliser. So given that, Argentina really wanted to score first, but they really didn't want to concede first because it'd make them very hard for them to get back in the game. That would suit Croatia's strengths very much so. Plus the fact that it was the semi-final, and semi-finals are typically more cagey affairs because it's much more important to not concede than it is to actually go up and score. So to me, all the signs were pointing towards this being a tight game, particularly early on, which meant that an under 2.5 goal trade would be a suitable strategy in this game. The odds did start very short, but there was still enough profit there to get some time decay in the opening 10 to 20 minutes. At that point the price would start to come in much slower because there'd be such a long way to go for the odds to not travel that much further. So I didn't want to be in this position too long. This is a type of game where, yes, at 0-0 it does look really unlikely that it would finish with under 2.5 goals. But let's say that Argentina got the first goal, that would make over 2.5 goals look much more desirable, as it would mean that Croatia would have to come out and that would cause chaos for them defensively and increase the chances of Argentina scoring more and more, making Croatia come out more and more to try and get back in the game, and goals would start flowing. So I really wanted to make sure that I definitely would cash out if at any point a goal would be scored whilst they had this position open. A goal never came when they had the position open and I could cash out for a decent profit. Argentina scored the first goal, which is slightly disappointing because that sort of killed the game off as I expected that it would do, and they went on to win comfortably 3-0. And in the second semi-final we saw France take on Morocco. This was an interesting game. I ended up placing 2 positions into the market. One of them won, one of them didn't win. Firstly, the losing position was an under 2.5 goal trade. Similar to what I just said in the Argentina match, semi-finals typically are cagey affairs with very few goals scored in that first 10 or so minutes. So that's why I got in on this market, expecting the odds to come in the opening period of time and to cash out for a nice profit in the first 10 minutes, and then to cash out and reassess the other options in the market. One of them other options I was looking at, a lay price on France, any other home win. Currently it looked too high odds at the start of the game, but I thought if France did score reasonably early in the game, I could lay this price as the market would overreact. Well, it would react, but I think it would overreact, thinking that France were more likely to then go on and score the desired goals needed to settle the bet as a loser, which would be 4 in this case. I didn't think that this would be a game where France would run away with it, scoring like 3, 4 or more goals. If they took the lead, they'd be happy to sit back and defend and win in an ugly manner, is what I thought. So I was hoping for those 2 things. Obviously the under 2.5 goal trade I wanted to be a profit, but if France did score, then I'd be placing that lay bet on any other home win and cashing out once people were realising that France weren't pushing on to score them extra goals. And it sort of played out in an okay-ish way, I guess. The under 2.5 goals trade settled for a loss. Fortunately, this was a very early goal, so I had taken no liability off the table in those opening minutes, so it was settled for the maximum loss I could take, which is about 50% of the stake. But because the goal was so early, any other home win odds come in shorter than I expected. So straight in there with a lay bet, and then I ended up cashing out of this position at half time. I could have left this position open for longer, but in that second half I didn't want to risk anything. You can see the graph there, the market rebounding and the way I capitalised to make profit in this market. There was an element of risk in this because if France did score a second whilst I had this position open, then clearly the price would come in even shorter and a cash out for another loss. But in this instance, that never happened, and I was happy to take the profit. And in the second half, I was looking for a position to get in, but I couldn't really find anything that was the right value for me. I was tempted to lay France at 1-0, given how much pressure Morocco were applying, but I never really thought that the goal would come, in all honesty, and France started to look more and more dangerous for that second goal, and eventually they did score the second goal, so I didn't place any more bets into that position. So that concludes the semi-finals, and now we're on to the final. When I was recording that last section there, I'd actually forgotten all about the 3rd place playoff, which I suppose is poetic justice for the most pointless game in all of football. I wasn't planning on trading or betting on this game at all, to be honest. I thought these are 2 teams that don't really score goals, but now is a game that has nothing on it. Maybe it would have more goals in it. However, I wasn't too sure, so I just thought I'd leave the game alone. However, when I saw that the game had 2 early goals, it was 1 apiece, I thought that now the game would add these early goals, that now the game would revert back to what its typical structure would be in 2 teams which aren't the best going forward and don't rely on scoring lots of goals to win their matches. So I thought that I'd enter the under 4.5 goal market. I was essentially doing an under 2.5 goal trade in here, but instead of doing it in the under 2.5 goal market, I was just going 2 goals up to the 4.5 goals market and performing the strategy in exactly the same way. As usual, for a strategy like this, I was gradually taking off my liability throughout the duration of the first half, and I got into a pretty healthy situation where if a goal was to be scored, I would still be able to cash out for a profit. But I was sort of thinking that no goal would be scored, even going into the second half, and I thought the odds would slowly go to 101. So I decided I'd keep this position open, hope that the game wouldn't have any more goals and I'd be able to cash out at 101. But if at any point between now and say about the 75th minute when that market would get to 101, maybe a little bit earlier, if a goal does get scored, then I would just cash out right there, taking whatever profit was on offer. That did happen. Croatia got a goal late on in the first half and I cashed out there for a profit. Not as high as it could have been, but I was happy with this position that I took in the market. At half time, I did place another position in the market, and that was in the any other correct score market for the Croatia win, so Croatia to win by 4 or more goals. I did this because I thought that now Croatia were winning, the game would settle into a very normal pattern that Croatia like, where they just sit back, try and control the game from a defensive point of view. That is typically how Croatia play. And Morocco really like to play in that way too, but because they're behind would have to go ahead and try and do a little bit more with the ball, but I don't think Croatia would really want to take that invitation of a counter-attack on too seriously, and would be happy to try and win this game 2-1. So doing that, I did a lay bet on the any other correct score market, so I didn't want Croatia to score 2 or more goals. I thought the odds were too short in this game for Croatia to score 2 goals in the second half. But I didn't want this position to open for too long because at these high odds, my liability is quite substantial. Should Croatia get 1 goal and put my position in serious jeopardy. So I already had a closing bet in at odds of 7. In the second half, Croatia were playing a little bit better than what I was expecting them to do, so I decided to cash out a little bit earlier, so I got a little bit less profit than the £10 I was hoping to get if my bet at odds of 7 would be matched. I should have probably kept the position open because in the end the game finished 2-1, but that's fine. It's better to be safe than to be too aggressive in these markets. And that leads us on to the World Cup final between France and Argentina. To be honest, I don't think these were the 2 best teams in the competition, but in a tournament that only has 7 games, getting 2 teams that aren't the best is no surprise at all, really. In my personal opinion, I thought France were the value bet in this market, but I didn't place a bet in because I wasn't too sure, and I was a little bit biased because obviously being English, like the most of the country, we obviously didn't really want Argentina to win. Even though I recognise I had that bias, I still thought that Argentina were too short in the to-win match in this event. There were odds about 1.9, if I remember, at the start of the game. Based off about 4.5 million polling votes I gathered off various polls across YouTube and Twitter, I found that the average percentage people were saying Argentina had was about 62% to win this game, so much higher percentage than the odds were suggesting. But I didn't think that was right. I thought France had that advantage in their end, but I can't really go against 4.5 million people and the market. That would be very arrogant to do that. So I decided to not place any bets in the match odds market. I did place a bet in the under 2.5 goals market. Finals obviously can be very cagey. This is very similar to the approach that I took in the semi-finals, but I thought that as well as it being cagey on paper, these are 2 teams that set up in a way that also facilitates a cagey game, even without the fact that it is a final added on top of that. The under 2.5 goal position was looking very well. It didn't look like either team were going to score in that first half. And as often was the case in this tournament, the referee decided to bottle it and award Argentina a soft penalty. Messi definitely didn't bottle it though, and Messi scored the penalty. And as I always do in the under 2.5 goal strategy, when there's a goal, I cashed out of the position at that point, taking a decent sized loss. In the second half, I was sort of tempted to lay Argentina. About odds of 1.5 is when I was looking to get in, but I decided to not do it, even though I could see that the game was sort of playing out in the same way the Argentina and Netherlands game did. Argentina, having that 2-0 lead, were just sitting back deeper and deeper, practically inviting France to score. But for one reason or another, France were really struggling in the game and I just didn't want to take this position. I should have took that position in hindsight because obviously the game finished 2-2. And I was just watching this far now in absolute devastation that England weren't here, because I really think that England wouldn't have had too many problems beating this Argentina's team. Especially, all you needed to do was press them and you'd pretty much have a good chance of winning, the way that Saudi Arabia did and the way that Australia did against them. Unfortunately, Australia didn't win. But France aren't a team that presses, and oh, what could have been if only England had beaten France in that quarter-final. But as much as I've been complaining, it was probably one of the greatest World Cup finals and perhaps even the greatest final in football history. It went to penalties in the end and Argentina got the win. Messi finally got his World Cup win. I didn't place any more bets throughout the game, and by the end of the tournament, let's look at the analysis of how I have got on. So, as long as I calculated everything correctly, I have made about £450, just over that, throughout this tournament. I'm showing you on screen now every single bet that I placed on the Betfair screen, just in case I've missed anything in that P&L tracker in the bottom right hand corner, because that's definitely possible given how quickly I've been trying to edit this video. It looks like to me, but if you really want to, you could pause this video and calculate it all out yourself, but I think that final value there is the correct value that I've made from this tournament. For the people who are big fans of graphs, here is my P&L graph throughout the tournament. As you can see, it's a little bit crazy, but it's obviously all going in the right direction. At no point during the tournament did I ever go in the red, which is quite lucky, to be honest. Over the long term, the variance gets you, and sometimes you do go in the red for long periods of time. For this instance, it wasn't the case. And then if I go back to my opening goals at the start of this video, I'm very happy that I've traded so many games using these larger stakes and learned so much about it, taking the big losses, taking the big wins, and obviously happy that I've not lost all of my money. I didn't really think I was going to lose all of my money, but I definitely thought I could have lost maybe £1,000 throughout doing this experiment. And what can I learn from this experiment? I feel like I can take a £50 loss and a £50 win as pretty much identical experiences. I feel absolutely nothing winning or losing £50. I think at the moment I still feel the £100 loss. I don't really feel any positive emotion with the £100 win, but I can definitely still feel the £100 loss. So hopefully in a few more months that'll completely be eradicated from my software in my brain, because it's not ideal when you can feel that you're losing money, because then you're ever more likely to start chasing money, chasing profits in the next market, and that's a disastrous path to go down. I clearly can't take anything from this about being actually long-term profitable at large stakes, given that it's only a relatively small sample size, one tournament, over 100 bets, but still not that many bets in the grand scheme of things. I really could have just been getting lucky here. I'm not quite sure yet until I've got many more tens and tens of thousands of markets before I can come to any reasonable sort of conclusions on that front. But the money's not really that much of an issue because, to be honest, I really enjoy doing this. It's been quite stressful making this video, doing the betting, and obviously working full time, moving house during all of this. It's been quite a stressful and emotional ride, but I've really enjoyed all of it really. It's a bonus that I've walked away with some profit, some decent profit, more than I expected to make in all honesty. And I'm excited to see where all this leads in the second half of the club football season and all the way through to 2023 and my trading and betting in that year. Hopefully I'm on an upwards trajectory. I hope you've appreciated the honesty that I've shown throughout this video by showing you all of my bets, including all the wins, but more importantly, all of my losses, because you don't really see many people here on YouTube or here on Twitter showing their losses, and that's for obvious reasons. Most people on the internet are trying to sell you something, and if they're showing their losses, that's detrimental to their sales. And I say most people on the internet are trying to sell you something, that includes me. I obviously have a Patreon where anyone can support me and also get some extra perks for supporting the channel. All these cool people are currently doing that. If you want to join, you can also find the link in the description below. If you watched this far, you are a true hero. I really appreciate it. It's been a long video, it's been a long journey. I hope you've enjoyed the tournament. I hope you've made profit yourself, and enjoy the rest of your year and new year. Thank you for watching, guys. I'll see you later.